So I'm trying to explain how it happened. Well, I used to be a high school math teacher. This is the drawing of one of my students 20 years ago, no? And, well, until 2010 when I retired. This history begins in the year 1995 when I found at the bottom of a drawer my slide rule, Graphoplex Neferlog 690, and my father's one. It was a Nestler 23 R3 that I used in the years 63, 70 during my studies, and I had forgotten them since almost 20 years, more than 20 years. At this time, I wondered what had become of this instrument, not in use. I had in that time no idea of the history of slide rules. I only remembered some trademarks, now Graphoplex, of course, Nestler, Faber-Castell, Hemison, maybe. Right. So I began to look at second-hand trades, flea markets, and some antique dealers about many rules without any interest at this time. But some of them were much more interesting. In particular, in Nantes, not in France, an antique dealer proposed me an obviously old slide rule, entirely made of wood. He indicated me that there was a name and an address, almost erased, and we managed to read Le Noir, 14 Rue Cassette, Paris. This told me absolutely nothing. Well, I bought it. Well, I had a Le Noir, but I didn't know. And it was, at this time, the beginning of Internet. So I discovered the Oughtred Society. I did not know nothing about Oughtred. I wonder, what does it mean, Oughtred? Well. And then I noticed that the name of Le Noir represented something very important for a number of collectors, and also in the history of science. Some years later, I was in touch with Bob Buttons, who was then the editor of the journal, and he kindly sent me a copy of the journal of spring 2002, which contained 2 articles, one from Francis Wells and Tom Wyman, I don't know, and the other one from Bob Buttons and Conrad Schur about the French rules in the 19th century and their makers. I discovered in these articles many things. And I can say it was the beginning of my search, First, it began by a curiosity. At this time, I did not absolutely intend to throw me in an academic search. But I was very interested in all that these articles had made me discover, and even more by the unknown elements of this period. So I began to look for documentation, books, and of course rules of this time. slide rules were still well known by many people who had used them either during their studies or during their professional activities. I had the opportunity to talk with some of them, some of these persons, and the memory of some users were very precise. They remembered the exact model and the way of using it and the period of their use during their life. I regret simply not having looked at this time for catalogs, which could be found in the years before 2000, much more easily than now. But I could get some French instruction manual of the 19th century. For example, 3 of the 4 editions of the Mouzin's manual. This is the first edition. It dates from 1823. And it's interesting to see that this manual that this manual mention règle à calcul or règle anglaise ou sliding rule. So you have here the provenance of the slide rule in France. This is looks for me very interesting, of course. And I had the possibility to acquire some I think, beautiful French rules. This is Le Noir slide rule, Jomard tip from 36 centimeters. I made an article in JOS number 19. Well, I'm sorry. Well, this presentation was made for Impress, and here you have not Impress. So it's in PDF form. Well, it would be normally horizontal. And some of these rules, well, you have the first one I speak, Tavernier Gravé, and Tavernier Gravé Mannheim 36, and Tavernier Gravé Soho 50 centimeters, which works like it is new. It slides fantastically. And it's from Rue de Babylone, so before 1860. So it has more than 150 years, and it slides as it is new. What I remarked, I was very surprised to notice that French books on slide rule seemed very rare, scarce. Not to say non-existent, only some instructions manual quite difficult to find, and that in France, practically nobody knew the names of Gravé, Tavernier. It's completely unknown. And only the name of Le Noir is a little more known because he was a very important instrument maker before making slide. Well, so in 2007, I was speaking with one of my colleagues. I was speaking of slide rules and my last find, and she told me that there was a course of history of science in the University of Nantes, and that she was a doctor in this specialty. I didn't know. I answer, of course, that at 57 years, I had not to resume studies, and of course, 3 months later, I inscribed in the master's degree of research at the University of Nantes. I remember when I spoke with the director of the subject of the subject I would like to study, and when I told her that it was maybe I preferred studied the history of slide rule, she was, I must say, very surprised, no? But I managed to explain her that yes, there are something to find, there's something to see. And finally, this professor, Evelyn Barbin, who is a great specialist of the history of mathematics, and she trusts me. I think she had never envisaged that one could work on the history of the slide rule, although she is interested in mathematical instruments. She often says that a mathematical instrument is a theorem in act, and this expression is very, well, it's quite true. So sorry. Yes, her experience was very precious to me, and I think I thank her for it. So I followed course in history of mathematics, history of physics, history of techniques, and so on. And I presented in 2009 a report on the subject, the introduction of the slide rule in France, 1815, 1851. This report was my first experience of scientific research. And I noticed that practically nothing has been written in France on this subject, and especially there were many things to be studied and discovered. So I retired next year, so I decided, with the support of Professor Barbin, to dig this subject and try to write a thesis. Well, a thesis is another work, long-term work and high scientific level. I began in 1999. So the first 2 years was consecrated to search for documentation, readings of the existing text, constitution of the most complete possible bibliography, yes, bibliography. After I had to bound the subject and to choose the problematic, and finally to draft, no? I want to say that for that purpose, I want to visit, in particular, the stores of the Museum of the Centre National des Arts et Métiers à Paris, le CNAM, which possesses a rather important number of rules, especially French. I strongly recommend this visit to all the collectors of scientific instruments. It's really an Aladdin's cave full of scientific and technical instruments. It's situated near Paris, near the Stade de France. It's new. It was built about 1995, something like that. And it's of course climatized with temperature regulation and so on. And you have you don't know where to. Oh, I'm sorry, I had forgotten this. This is a part of my collection of Le Noir, Gravé Le Noir, Tavernier Gravé, slide rule from 20 centimeters on the left, 27, and 36 and 50. I have some. What? This is in the store of the CNAM, of the Museum of the CNAM. It's a slide rule, yeah. With you see the slide with a gear. It weighs about 40 kilos. We were three persons and the curator did not know this instrument was there. I told it, wait, I want to see the object number. We find it, and it was this monstrous slide rule. It was used in the class of the Centre National des Arts Métiers. Yes, the slide. How did you call that? A manival? No? Yeah. Well, if you have the occasion to visit this building, you must take a rendezvous, but you will be well received, and I think it works. Well, for my taste, I remember I had already realized that a few years before. It was during a discussion in the IM of, I don't know if it was in Leiden or in Boston, that the introduction of slide rule in various countries seemed to follow the route of the industrialization in Europe and in USA and in Japan. In particular, when I discovered the role played by James Watt in the improvement of the English rules, I said to myself that it could not be a coincidence that this character, so symbolic of the industrialization, needed to use slide rule adapted to the industrial production.